Started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to OITE's Mental Health Lecture Series at the National Institute of Health. I'm excited to welcome our presenter today, my colleague Annie Shiner, who is a well-being advisor in the Office of Intramural Training and Education. I'm Erica Shirley. I'm also one of the well-being advisors in OITE as well. Excited to hear about Annie's insights and wisdom and recommendations on how we can both prevent and recover from burnout. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Erica. So welcome to the talk. As Erica said, it's on burnout, and we will be talking about what it is and what it's not and how to deal with it. So let's start with looking at what it is. And the first thing that's important to note is burnout is a work stress-related issue. And so it's a unique form of unmanaged work-related stress. You can be stressed, you can be severely stressed and not be burnt out. You can have unmanaged stress and not be burnt out. But we will be talking today about when those two combinations, unmanaged work-related stress, lead to burnout and what you can do about it and how to help recover from it. So first thing to note is that burnout is characterized by three things, all of which must be present in order to define it as burnout. So the first is the impact on your well-being. It's chronic emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. Then it affects your feelings about how you feel about your work, disconnected from it, cynical about it. And then the third element is a diminished sense of accomplishment. You don't feel like your work's going anywhere and you're focused on the negative aspects of your work. So a little bit of a deeper dive into those three elements. The emotional exhaustion is really emotional, physical, mental. It's just like, I am so tired. It's kind of the first thing that people think of when they think about burnout. And so it means being drained by the mental demands of your work. And that can lead to feelings of exhaustion and fatigue. And it also can lead to difficulty in mustering energy to deal with it, to do the work itself or to do the changes that will help you. So it becomes more difficult because you're so tired. The second element, again, is the cynicism or depersonalization. It's the I don't care. And the classic example of this in healthcare workers is that they went in caring about the people that they're delivering healthcare to, but when they're burned out, they just stop caring about those people. So that's a classic example of that depersonalization. You start developing negative attitudes, you lose your idealism about why you're there, you can be apathetic or disengaged, and then you start avoiding people and avoiding relationships. And the third element is feelings about your own efficacy and your own sense of what you're doing. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to make any difference. You know, I may do these small experiments, but it's not going to cure any diseases. You know, I worked my whole career on some enzyme, it isn't going to change the world for anybody. So you start looking at everything through that negative, distorted lens. Sometimes you may have an accurate assessment that, yes, the one thing you do isn't going to lead to the final cure, but it is a brick in the building the success of research, and you lose the fact that your brick is essential. And you also start feeling negatively about your own work, increase in imposter fears, increase in your doubts about your ability to perform professionally. This can be accompanied by perfectionism, super high standards about how well you should be doing, and guilt for not doing better, shame about not doing better, and really not having much compassion for yourself for what you're going through. You get focused on I'm not doing well, and I'm a terrible scientist. So when we are experiencing burnout, it can present in different ways. And for a given person, you can have a burnout pattern. Hopefully you don't have a pattern of burnout, but there may be a pattern. And for a given person, it can also change depending on the circumstances. So the first type of burnout is frenetic burnout, where it leads to sustained, intense overwork, working to exhaustion. And the sense it gets mixed up with, I need to work this hard in order to be productive, even though the work is becoming less and less productive. So you stop paying attention to your well-being and eventually to the cost of your work. The next version of burnout is burnout, where you feel like I have no control over my work or what the work outcomes are. I'm not getting recognized for it, and I am just done. I am done with this. I feel hopeless about it, and I feel incompetent because I'm not getting any recognition. And so, like, why am I doing this? The third form is sort of the reverse side of the coin from frenetic, and it's under challenge. It's when the work is unrewarding. It could be really boring and monotonous, understimulating. Like, why did I go to school? I've got all these degrees and served all these fellowships to be doing this. And so you start getting cynical about it. You start avoiding, like, I don't even want to go in. I don't care. So those are the three presentations, common presentations of burnout. And you can have a mixture of them. You can have elements from each one when you are experiencing burnout. So some of the symptoms that can show up when someone is experiencing burnout, the behavioral changes can be observable by other people, as well as you can observe it in yourself. So being late for and canceling appointments, making more mistakes, being more critical about yourself and about other people. So they may feel the sharp edge of your burnout too, get more increase in sarcasm. So noting these are changes. So somebody may be a sarcastic person all the time, but they're more sarcastic or more critical um, than typically. Uh, the other thing is that you can start withdrawing from things. Not showing up, maybe you used to have lunch with some of your colleagues and no longer participating in that. So withdrawing from informal things as well as more formal things. I think I'm going to skip that meeting. I have too much to do, kind of thing. Having more emotional outbursts at work, more than is typical for you. Also, it's that working long, unproductive, spinning your wheel hours. I have to keep doing this, uh, revising my slide like I did for this talk. I had to revise my slides 50 times. They don't need revision anymore. They've got everything I wanted. So it's an unproductive sort of like spinning your wheel work that you do maybe to distract yourself or avoid what you have to be, what something else that you could do, or else because you're focused on that my work isn't good enough, I have to make it perfect. And then another piece of it can be presenteeism, which is you're present at work, but you're no longer working much. And so that those changes are observable by other people, but also observable yourself. So you may get feedback from someone else saying, I noticed, are you doing okay? I noticed you've just been more critical, you've been withdrawing, I wonder what's going on. So someone else may notice, and not in a judgmental way, but in a caring way. The other arena of ourselves that burnout can impact is our emotional, psychological, and physical self. And I should include a cognitive self in there too. So you may be just feeling your emotion, a much greater tendency to negative emotions, uh, frustration, irritability, resentment. I really resent that I have to do this task that isn't going anywhere and is meaningless, and I'm doing it over and over and over again, and it's not fulfilling to me anymore or interesting. You can also feel just the negative, like hopelessness and sadness can accompany that. I used to really love science and I just don't anymore, and I'm never going to love it again. And I'm looking ahead at a bleak life where I'm doing something that I don't care about anymore. Was college the height of my life? And so that feeling of dissatisfaction with your life and with your work can be part of it. Also, another piece is sort of the self-doubt and anxiety, the mental worrying, increased imposter fears. I'm not any good at it. Imposter fears are feeling like you're inadequate and that you're going to get found out. And so you're worried that people will realize that your work isn't going anywhere. It can also impact our mental functioning. So particularly can show up in some of the executive functioning skills that get diminished. Memory, I have trouble remembering. What did I do? What am I supposed to do? Um, Keeping attention. So it can present sort of more like a distracted attention behavior or a decreased ability to problem solve. I'm looking at this problem and I used to be able to solve it. And I don't have a clue what to do about it. So those things can impact our productivity. And then also, very clearly, somatic complaints can accompany burnout. Uh, Sleep, it happens for sure, changes in eating, insomnia, in your activity levels, and not because you decide intentionally to reduce that, but that can be the energy and also the ability to sleep, the loss of appetite. So those can also be symptoms of burnout. So we have the symptoms, they're showing up, and then also some more of the ways that burnout can impact an individual, because this is a serious stress-induced issue, and the impact has significance for us. It's not like I was tired this week and I came in on Monday. I had a busy weekend and I came in tired instead of rested. This is much more of a serious issue. And so the impact can be much more serious. So we get decreased motivation and productivity. And the decreased productivity will show up in the bullet points that follow this top one. Um, because our job satisfaction went down. I was excited about doing this work and I no longer am. It just isn't meaningful to me right now. Um, and the right now is often the perspective that we lose. This work has lost all meaning. And some of the hopelessness is the feeling that it will be true forever. Um, but also, as a result, we lose the creative parts and the innovative parts of ourselves. And science is very innovative and very creative. And when you start losing access to those strengths, it can then also perpetuate the burnout. And what we do get an increase in is avoidance behaviors, procrastination, absenteeism, presenteeism, where you show up and don't work, and even quitting. So people can leave the job, or they might feel like, or actually leave the field. So we can lose some good scientists, some good people through burnout. Another thing that happens is that the productive workplace behaviors can get replaced with counterproductive behaviors. In addition to avoidance and procrastination, there you may see more anger, more aggression, and more blaming of self or others. Again, the physical issues we talked about a little bit in the symptoms. Very common ones are GI issues and headaches, pain. Burnout has been shown to increase cardiovascular risks, and susceptibility to infection. So people say, I don't know, I just like, it's not only have I been having a tough time at work, but I keep getting colds, and so your body is actually more susceptible to infections. As we said, insomnia and chronic fatigue and high cortisol levels and the consequences of that. And again, the cognitive impairments and mental health issues. And we'll be talking about mental health issues a little bit more in a minute. And then also the maladaptive behavior. So in addition to anger and aggression, you may turn to other things to feel better or to numb out the negative feelings. So people are more vulnerable to abusing alcohol or recreational drugs or screens, or other things that numb you out so you don't have to feel the bad feelings that you feel. And those may be a very short-term temporary solution, but they do not improve the situation of well-being. So they're maladaptive or unhelpful coping strategies. So burnout is a stress-induced situation, and often the stress is not in a community, in a research group, a lab, a classroom, an institution, is not just felt by only one person. Often many people are stressed. So there is sort of can be communal or community burnout, where you have reduced productivity of the whole group. And often, like, it may start with low morale and then the burnout contagion effect. And that can be a psychological contagion, but it also is like, if person A is functioning at lower abilities, then person B may try to compensate for them. And then person B becomes more vulnerable to burnout. And so then they start functioning lower, and person C tries to compensate for A and B. So it can have that sort of domino effect, as well as the sharing of the negative attitudes and the negative feelings that come with burnout can also lead to burnout contagion. In addition to the contagious effect, you can also have other things that can happen in a community that is experiencing burnout among some or many members, is there's decreased collaboration between the members, among the members, and also between that group and another group. And instead of collaboration, either formal or informal, there can be increased conflict and discord between people. Um, this can lead to an undesirable work environment, even a toxic work environment. And when the work environment becomes toxic, then you're more likely to have job turnover. You'll lose group members. Who wants to work there? People leave. And also the group's reputation can become damaged so that fewer people will apply to be part of that group. You get reduced numbers or reduction in the number of desirable applicants to the group, which can then make it harder for the group to be productive in the level it'd like to be, and also fewer opportunities to collaborate. Think about who you have. If you have collaborated in your work, you want to collaborate with someone who is excited about the work, who works hard and is productive. And so that can lead to a loss of collaboration opportunities as well. So burnout can impact us as people and us as people in communities, and it can impact the community. It can be a very serious issue in science. And I think that we had huge numbers of people signing up for this talk, and I think that's everybody recognizes it's a huge issue for themselves, and it's a huge issue for the scientific community as a whole. So let's take a minute to think about, we're going to do a poll, and I'm going to just read the points on the poll, and then I'm going to turn it over to Erica, who is going to put the poll up, and you can all participate in it. But before, let me just read through. I want you to take this minute to think about how you would rate your own level of burnout. 1, I enjoy my work and have no symptoms. 2, occasionally I am under stress and I don't always have as much energy as I once did, but I don't feel burned out. 3, I am definitely burning out and have one or more symptoms of burnout, such as physical or emotional exhaustion. 4, the symptoms of burnout that I'm experiencing won't go away, and I think about frustration at work a lot. And 5, I feel completely burned out and often wonder if I can go on. So Erica is posting the poll. And Erica, I initially saw the poll coming up, and I don't know whether other people can. What you all see?
Yeah, Annie, I can see this. I can see the poll.
Okay, great. I see the poll, and at some point, I guess Uli, you'll come in so I can also see the results of the poll. I have tech support here at NIH. Nice place to work. Do you want this? I do want to see results. So if that's where I have to see the results, and that's great. And you have to go click in here again to people. In there. Yes. Okay. So when you're done, click there. Looks like we are still getting some results. I see is 1% selected number 1. I know symptoms of burnout. Not surprising. It is a self-selected group. You all came to talk on burnout. 28%, so more than a quarter, are experiencing some stress, are aware of the stress that they're under. Another 38% are having some symptoms. 20%, a fifth of the people, are feeling pretty strong symptoms and frustrated, and 12% are feeling definitely burnt out. So that's kind of a mix of I think, probably not a typical of people working in a very high stress field automatically in a high stress time. So thank you all for participating. As you can see, wherever you are, however you answered this poll, you're not alone because there are other people in each of those categories. So now let us move on. So one thing I want to make clear before we go far, well, actually, let me stop and make two things clear. One, we'll take questions at the end. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. We'll save time for that. And the other thing I want to make clear is that the slides will be available and a recording will be available after the talk is over. And I think we will send out an email, or somebody will send out an email where you can access that. So back to the content of the talk. Burnout is not a mental health disorder. It does not show up in the DSM, which is the Bible of mental health disorders, mental illness. What it is a specific form of stress-induced exhaustion. That said, burnout can coexist with mental health disorders. You can have both. We wouldn't call it comorbidity because comorbidity suggests that they're both mental health disorders. But burnout can coexist with mental health disorders. It can make you more vulnerable to mental health issues, and mental health issues can make you more vulnerable to burnout. And not only are you more vulnerable, but they can also make each other worse. So you may have both of those, and they are worse rather than having not just additive, but exponentially worse. So they can be in a relationship with each other inside of you. So here, let's just look a little bit more clearly about comparing burnout to depression and anxiety, because those are the ones that it most often is talked about in conjunction with them. So if you notice, like this particular table, the causes row, they're very distinct. There's burnout, and then there's the two mental health disorders. And I'll talk about the specifics in a minute. But then there are the symptoms row, there's a lot more cross mix. And so it can make it difficult to determine whether you are undergoing burnout or depression and or anxiety. And so in order to help you tease that out, we'll talk about some of the things that help you, but you may need the insight of a professional to help you figure out what is going on. Don't rather than diagnosing yourself. But moving up to the first row, causes, as I said, burnout is prolonged or excessive, unmanaged workplace stress. That's what causes it. Because we're talking about workplace burnout. There are other kinds of burnout, but that's not the one we're talking about today. Depression and anxiety, on the other hand, are caused by a combination of things. So it can be a genetic predisposition, can be part of the mix. What's happened, brain chemistry. There are probably a lot of people in this room, in this conversation, who are much more knowledgeable about brain chemistry than I am. I come from a mental health background, but not a neuroscience background. Medical conditions can cause or exacerbate depression and anxiety, environmental factors, and life experiences. And that's where burnout may play a part, is that it can be a life experience that can contribute to depression or anxiety. So symptoms of them. All three, burnout, depression, and anxiety, all three share negative thoughts. The tendency to have negative thoughts, a preponderance of negative thoughts. But in burnout, the negative thoughts are focused on the work and your efficiency and your ability to work. In depression, the negative thoughts tend to be more about yourself. I am a horrible person. The world is hopeless. And in anxiety, the negative thoughts tend to be worrying about what's going to happen next. I'll get found out. The world will end. Something terrible will happen. Anxiety is a forward-looking fears and worries. In all three of them, there are negative changes in health, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And as we looked at before, the ones for burnout, we looked at in earlier slides, those can also show up in anxiety and depression. So there can be some overlap for those. So that is the one most commonly shared. In burnout and depression, one of the symptoms tend to be, not always, but they tend to be low energy, disconnection, feelings of hopelessness, and feelings of inadequacy. That can be a key and prevalent characteristic of depression. In anxiety, a key characteristic of anxiety is your nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system is activated, and you tend to go in fight, flight, or freeze mode, which is much likely to be much more hyper as opposed to in depression, where it is low energy and hopelessness. The bottom part of the symptoms description in burnout can lead to apathy. I just don't care anymore. In depression, it's more characteristic, pervasive, and persistent feelings of emptiness, sadness, and shame. And shame is a very central piece of depression. But shame can show up in all of these things. We're all vulnerable to be feeling ashamed about ourselves and about what we've done. Whereas in anxiety, it tends to be what tends to dominate our excessive worries and racing thoughts. So in teasing out which one it is, you may have to look deeper into the feelings and maybe, as I said, have talked to someone to help you tease out what's going on, because it really isn't. It's important to know what you're dealing with so that you can deal with it, so you can get the appropriate treatment. If you use antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, doesn't treat burnout, for example. But depression and anxiety both often do require, if you have clinically diagnosed and serious depression or anxiety, it often does require professional treatment. It may not, but it typically does. And certainly consultation with a mental health professional with possibility of therapy and or medication. Whereas with burnout, burnout without being accompanied by anxiety or depression typically resolves itself with self-care, with addressing the causes of the stress, and with making changes in how you work and in your workplace. So if you just do the self-care, I just need to take a break and get some sleep and take a day off or a few days off and go back, but you don't change what led you to get burned out, you're likely to go through the same cycle again. So you may take care of this episode, but you don't want to be vulnerable to getting a reoccurring pattern of burnout. So that's why we talked about making work and workplace changes and addressing the causes of stress. But with all three of them, healthy coping and self-care practices will both help you feel better, help you get better, and help you stay better. So what is it that puts us at risk for burnout? Because as I said in the beginning, not every time that we're severely stressed or that we don't manage that stress, we are burned out. But things that can make moments of severe stress, unmanaged stress, lead to burnout include the following. So it can be the work itself. You're overloaded with work. You have competing demands at work. I could do A or I could do B, but I can't do both of those, at least not in the time that you've given me. Can I do one first and the other second? So competing work demands. And again, as we talked about before, it can also be undemanding, unrewarding, and boring work can also lead to burnout. You're just disengaged mentally from it because it's not stimulating anymore. So having too little to do can lead to burnout. I came here to do something and I had nothing to do. Also, which can be part of if I have too little to do or I have too much to do, you can feel like you're having a lack of progress or effectiveness. You feel ineffective in your work. So that's an element of burnout. And finally, on this list, obviously there are more things. This is not an exhaustive list, but the last thing is that if your work doesn't align with your values, I came here because I cared about or I wanted to do this and it's not happening and I don't believe in what I'm doing anymore, that can also make it harder make us more vulnerable to feeling apathetic, to feeling overworked, to feeling like we're ineffective. So there is the work that you're doing. And then the other piece of that is the environment that you're working in also can increase the risk of burnout. So if the expectations on you about your work production or performance are unclear, they're ambiguous, or they're extremely and unreasonably high, too much is expected of that's practical, that is makes us more vulnerable to risking burnout. If we don't have any sense of control or any input in what we're doing and in how we do it, so that we feel like I'm just a cog in the machine here, that makes us more vulnerable to burnout. If we're uncertain, if the work environment is uncertain, what's going to happen? Is this project going to continue? Is my project going to go anywhere? There's instability, or we don't trust if people are not being honest with us about the work or about what is expected of us, or the feedback. I don't trust that the feedback is honest. They keep telling me everything's okay, but these experiments aren't going anywhere. Something must not be right. I need more honest feedback. All of those things can make us more vulnerable for burnout. The next thing, again, is poor supervision and lack of support. So these are insufficient, unhelpful, too controlling, or even outright harmful supervision and support is a risk factor for burnout. Conflict, if we're working in a place with high conflict, that can happen. Toxic work environments where there's maltreatment, abuse, feeling unsafe. And we'll talk later about what a safe workplace feels like, some of the elements of that. And again, if the work environment doesn't align with your needs or temperament, if you are a person who finds noise and distraction, noise very distracting, and activity around you very hard to work, and that's the kind of place you have to work in, you're working at a bench where there's a lot happening around you, it takes a lot of energy to be able to function in that. And that kind of use of your energy and draining of your energy can also make you more vulnerable for burnout. Or the contrary, if you get stimulated by having people to talk to about the work, and you work you're the only one in the lab on the days you're there, and there's no stimulation or no back and forth of ideas, that can also make you more vulnerable for burnout. So when we have risk factors, hopefully we also have protective factors. These are things that, if they're present in the workplace, then they mean that they can help us A, manage the stress, because this is unmanaged stress, or B, deal with the stress, even if the stress itself is unmanaged. So protective factors can be sort of two sort of general categories here: the supportive work environment and the healthy work environment. So in a supportive work environment, just to start with, you get adequate orientation and job and task training and clear expectations. So I know what is expected of me, I know how to do it, and now I just have to go and do it. Group members get a sense of influence over their work and their work outcomes. There are training and scientific and professional opportunities. There is ongoing, helpful, consistent advising, coaching, and mentoring. Your strengths are recognized. You're given autonomy as appropriate. And that the group acknowledges each other's efforts, not just achievements, but efforts, progress, and achievements. So that's a supportive work environment. In a healthy work environment, there's psychological safety, fair treatment, appropriate boundaries, and open communication. It does allow for some flexibility and accommodation. That addresses the stress elements in the workplace. So that's one of the ways of reducing stress, and the environment addresses the element. Issues are addressed when they come up, and members are informed about and encouraged to use resources and supports, both scientific and professional, and mental health and other resources and supports. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute when we talk about things that people can do. So those were the workplace protective factors, the things that the environment that you work in. And then there are protective factors for the individual that each of us brings to our life, and these things that can help us deal with the stress of work. So the first one is interests outside of work. So having activities that you enjoy, that give you energy, because if your work is very draining, then you need to renew and refill your energy somewhere. And so having activities that you enjoy. I know for myself during the pandemic, when I was working from home all the time, I turned to gardening. And my husband thought I was crazy because why are you out in the hot sun? That's exhausting. And for me, it was energizing. I got to feel like I could see things grow. I watered them and they grew. So whatever it is for you, finding that helps you deal with the stress of work. Uh, and also activities, as I said, that give you not just energy, but a sense of accomplishment. So for me, as I say, gardening, I watered it, I fed it, it grew. I felt like I did something. Of course, I didn't actually grow it, the plant grew it, but I provided the water. Um, so that's thinking about your interests outside of work and paying attention and giving time to them. Another protective factor for us each as individuals is resilience. And just a little plug here, we have OIT offers a wonderful series called Becoming a Resilient Scientist. And there will be a link posted. There is a link for that listed in one of the future slides. And I highly recommend it. And it's available on demand, on asynchronously on our YouTube channel. But in particular, in terms of the protective factors of resilience, is defined as being able to function when things are going hard and also to recover from when things haven't gone well. So part of the ability to continue functioning is being flexible. Okay, this isn't working. Let me find another way to do that. Rather than getting more rigid, like I have to do it this way, I'm going to make it work, which can lead to lack of productivity and also to just frustration and eventually burnout. And then the other piece of that is having adequate, healthy coping skills and practices so that you can deal with the uncomfortable things that come up, the negative emotions, the problems. So a third protective factor for individuals is connection. So this is really important, is having people in your life who care about you and who you care about and you enjoy, so that's what could be one person. It could be many people. They could be in your daily life. They could be someone that you don't see much, but that you can reach out to remotely. So building connections with people. Having connections with yourself, so not cutting off yourself. So paying attention to how you think and how you feel and what you need and what you dream for, what you want your aspirations for yourself. And then connections with something outside of yourself. So I put nature, spirituality, your values, your religion, however you want to define that, so that you feel meaningfully part of a larger world than the small world of your work. And then the last is sort of the obvious one that we always talk about, self-care. And you're a tool to do your work in a way, and if you don't take care of the tool, the machine, it isn't going to be able to work very well anymore. So tending to the basics, taking breaks, eating, sleeping, participating in activities, exercises, tending to personal non-related stressors, because if you're having problems at home, they are ultimately going to seep into the workplace. And then again, refraining from substance abuse or for numbing out behaviors. So just taking a minute to think about work, because when we define ourselves, this is a work issue. When we define ourselves solely with our work, we blur the boundaries between our work and our lives, and we lose a loss of the things that we love outside of work. And the consequences can be really significant, because when we define ourselves by work, if we fail at work, we see ourselves as a failure. When we hate our work, we hate ourselves. And when we lose part of our work or all of our work, we lose a part of ourselves. So that blurring of that relationship, you are not your work, but it can start to feel like that. And feeling that way and not stepping back from that, again, can contribute to burnout. So taking a minute to think about this, your relationship with your work. We're not going to do a poll here, but just think, are you interested in your work? Does it tend to put you in a better or worse mood? How much of the time outside of work do I think about work? Do I talk about things not related to work ever with anybody? Do I engage in activities not related to work? And am I ashamed? Do I hide it if I take a break, or even if I take time to unplug for a minute? So this is an important kind of self-assessment as we think about this workplace issue is what is my relationship with work? So now that we've talked about contributing factors and risk factors, let's move to addressing burnout. So the goal in addressing burnout is not just not being tired, it's being able to re-engage in your work and in your life. Part of that is being less tired, but it also is being more excited and less cynical and apathetic. It's also increasing your sense of personal achievement and efficacy. So you need to address all three of those if you meet the definition of burnout in order for you to no longer meet the definition of burnout. And so addressing that will include both prevention and recovery. So to begin with, in addressing burnout, the first thing is like doing a self-assessment, being aware, know your own burnout signs and assess your burnout level. And you all did assess your burnout level before. And you might, as we were talking about the signs and symptoms, you might have been saying, that's me, that's not me. So knowing that, reflecting on your relationship with work and use of time, like you just did, identifying barriers to well-being, we'll get to that in a minute, and then including talking, reflecting with yourself and reflecting with others. So self-awareness is the first part. The second part is once you've sort of determined what the situation is, you can move to taking action. And action will include changes in your relationship at work, changes in how you use your time and energy, changes in how you take care of yourself, building more connections or utilizing connections that you have and accessing resources, whether they're job offered, HR offered, or private or professional offers. And then also you can consider advocating. I need to change this environment. There are things about this environment that don't work for me, or the way I do my job that increases the stress. And so advocating for those changes. So here are some of the steps. We talked about steps more specifically. Time is a huge piece of burnout. So managing your time better than you have, building in time for rest, relaxation, and renewal, setting priorities. These are the things that matter to me, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on things that don't matter to me or to the job, and maintaining those. So setting boundaries and schedules, and not just good enough to write them down and do them for 3 days. You want to make them part of your everyday life. And then also, so being intentional about your work, your discretionary time, and being intentional about your work time, and also being intentional about your discretionary time in ways that we talked about before. So that's the first step you can take. The second one is managing stress. And again, asking for help and support. Because often we don't have the energy to do it ourselves. So we may need help with this, to either deal with it in the moment or to make the changes that will help us deal with it on an ongoing basis. So developing healthy coping strategies is another part of the resilience, is changing it. How do I deal with this stress? Because the stress isn't going to disappear just because we want it to. It's what caused the problem in the first place, and we don't want it to cause it again. So learning ways of relaxing, whether it's mindfulness or breathing or through physical activity or lots and lots, there's an infinite number of ways to relax, and finding ones that work for you. How to change your thoughts, cognitive reframing, so that when you look at problems, you can think about them as things to solve, to challenge your constant negative thinking, so that it's not like I'm no good at science. It's like this experiment didn't work, but let's figure out how to do it better. And then the other piece is managing uncomfortable emotions, because stress brings up a lot of uncomfortable emotions. So emotion regulation is important. And learning how to do that, to deal with those uncomfortable emotions without needing to numb out or overwork, uh, is an important part of managing this stress. And then the other thing is to think about, does this work environment work for me? And if it doesn't, like as example I gave about too much or too little stimulation, but there may be other kinds of things that you want to look at and say, is this exacerbating the problems, and what changes might be helpful that are possible to happen? And then, so a big piece of another step you can take is self-care. At OITE, we often talk about this 4-quadrant model of well-being, which is the body, the physical, the mind is the mental, the heart is the emotional, and the spirit is sort of something bigger than you that you believe in. And so well-being is things we do or refrain from doing from managing our well-being. As I said, there's an in-depth discussion of this on the OIT YouTube channel. So this is part of the Becoming a Resilient Scientist series. And again, a plug for recommending you check that out. So let's take a moment to think about, we're talking about taking care of ourselves, but what if you are someone who runs a research group or runs a lab or is a teacher or is a mentor or in some way is responsible for other people? The things that you can do to help build a supportive environment that will help them, first of all, is to review your orientation process. What happens when people come in? Making sure expectations are reasonable and clear, and confirming that they understand them. Because if you say, you don't have to work 7 days a week, but they see everybody else working 7 days a week, they may assume that that's what you have to do. So confirming expectations are understood, mutually understood. And also how to request reasonable flexibility and accommodations for times that they need them. Open communication. So it's not only that you feel comfortable talking to people, but they feel comfortable coming to you when they have concerns or issues. Generally encouraging group members, here are some ways you can do it through providing guidance and support about careers, about the work, and appropriate feedback, and meeting regularly one-on-one and honoring those regular meetings if you're a mentor or a supervisor. For allowing and encouraging people to take advantage of professional opportunities and trainings, encouraging their autonomy and ownership of the work, and identifying their strengths and acknowledging them and offering them opportunities to use their strengths. So someone may come into your group not knowing a whole lot about the actual science that you do, but they may be a great organizer. And you might say, can you look at the freezer and help us think of a better way to organize this so that things are more readily accessible when we want them. So there are lots of creative ways to use people's strengths. And so finding out what they are, you find out more about them and then they feel known and understood, and that helps. That's connection. But also then they have an opportunity to contribute and feel like they make a difference. And that also helps as a buffer for burnout. And then encouraging the group, because you don't want a burnt out group. So encouraging group morale and cohesion. And so that can be scheduling work and non-work related events. Although because we're talking about not abusing substances, happy hour doesn't count as a wellness event, but it may be a fun thing to do. So also the second piece of this, if you're responsible for other people, is supporting the healthiness of the work environment. So addressing workplace stressors. When you can, redesign or adapt stressful tasks or pieces of the work environment to be less stressful. Just because you've always done it that way, maybe it can be done differently. Maybe something can be changed that would make it less stressful, either too much work or too boring work for the people who are actually doing it. And if there are things that can't be changed, you can think about modifying the time that people have to be participating in or exposed to stressful elements. So that's something that a supervisor or the head of a group can do that the people who work in the group can't necessarily do. Another thing that's important if you are responsible for other people is creating a psychologically safe environment. And that means that people in the group can ask questions, they can contribute their ideas, they can express their concerns, and they're not fearful of being criticized or by you or other people in the group. So making it a place where ideas are welcome and concerns are welcome. And another piece of psychological safety is respecting their privacy. And so if they come to you and say, I'm really struggling, that does not become public information. That is something between you and the person who is working under you. Knowing the resources and support so you can pass them on and encouraging them to use it. Modeling your own behaviors, so do what I say, not what I do, is the message becomes expectations are to do what you do. And so that doesn't encourage healthy behavior if you're not engaging in it yourself. And then not avoiding, but addressing problems when they happen. So the last piece is that we know all this, and yet that's really nice, but like I tried it, it doesn't work. And so that means that there's some barriers for you. And so one of the things to do is to look at what are your personal barriers to your well-being that can impact your burnout. So perfectionism, imposter fears, and other distorted stories like that is rampant in the science world. So learning about what those are and challenging them, challenging, figuring out strategies. Why am I procrastinating? Why am I avoiding? What am I doing? Seeing what you're doing and challenge ways to address it head on. And through all this, be compassionate. It's not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. We feel guilty. We feel ashamed. We feel like I should have worked harder. If I was a better person, a stronger person, I wouldn't be burnt out. And it isn't that you're not a good person or a strong person or a smart person. It's that you are experiencing unmanaged workplace stress. So be compassionate and stop focusing. When we focus on how terrible we are, we don't focus on solutions to change the situation, to make us feel better, to function better. Fear of what others think about us can also be a barrier. It can be a temperament, it can be cultural, it can be whatever, but that can hold us back from setting boundaries. Um, and as can like assertiveness is not okay. Or you think it's okay, I don't know how to do it right. I come off as being mean and aggressive or selfish. And so learning appropriate assertiveness skills. And to address the barriers, so doing that assessment and then thinking about addressing them, you can do it. Some people just do reflection, journaling, writing, reading, talking to other people can help. Also increasing your knowledge and skill set through workshops, training, therapy, coaching. I want to take a minute to acknowledge that the barriers I just talked about are ones that we bring with us, but some barriers are external and they're imposed on us by the outside world. And those are barriers. And those are very real and they are very impactful. So the first thing is to be aware of what is in your control and what is not in your control. And so addressing things that are in your control and how we deal with the things that are not in our control, maybe first step is acknowledging them. And then the second step may be working with other people to support each other. This is the reality that we have to deal with. So how do we support each other through this reality? And if you can, and if you want to, is advocating for the changes that you need and other people need, and working together with other people to address those barriers that are outside of your control. Which brings us to sort of not going it alone. So ask for help and support before it's too late, before you're overwhelmed and burnout. Use the resources that you have and find communities that share your interests, that share your values and priorities, that are supportive to you, and that are not all work related. You may have the best friends in the world at work, but it gets a lot harder to talk about things other than work if all the people you see are from work. So if you can find ways to join in communities that are not focused on work. If you're experiencing burnout now, one of the things to do is recognize and acknowledge it. Name it. It's not that something that you're a bad person or an inadequate person. You are a person experiencing burnout. Then take care of yourself. Take time to recover, to recharge, because it's a depleting experience. Get help. Ask for support, both at work and in the rest of your life, because it will impact your private life in some way at some point. Then you want to once you're sort of like at a place where you can start doing the next steps, is like some review, like how did I get here? What happened? Why? So that you don't go back and repeat the cycle again, and problem solve what you could do differently in the future, and then make the changes that will help you do differently in the future, whether it's in yourself, in your relationship at work, in the resources and supports you have, or in the work environment that you have. So now, kind of just as our last thing is taking a minute to reflect. All of you, wherever you were on the burnout scale, might want to make some changes or adaptations of things that are in your control going forward. So think about for a minute, what changes might you make to make your work more engaging to you, to make your schedule work better for you, to maintain a life outside of work? So think about that. And if you feel comfortable, you can post some of the ideas in the chat so we can learn from each other. Whoops. I'm not sure how. Uli, can you? Sorry, I'm not at my computer and I don't want to screw it up. How do I access the chat so I can see that? Well, at least if you can all see that without
Annie,
losing. Yeah.
Hi, Annie, this is Erica. So everybody can access the Q&A and put their responses in.
Oh, okay. So we
the
can share.
Q&A.
All right. So maybe this is not a comfortable sharing. So we'll go on to the. So think about this. Things that you can share, and if you want to put them in Q&A, feel free to do that. So we all going to go to QA in just a minute and we can look at that. But thank you all for coming, for listening, and for being reflective and engaging in the poll and engaging in the thought exercises. There are 3 more prompts at the end following this that you could use to reflect on how you're doing in your relationship with your work. And we wish you great success in managing and preventing burnout as you go through what you learned today. I'll show the prompts, but there'll be takeaways for you when you get the slides. So it's a weekly review, checking in with yourself, and a reflection on your relationship with work. So now we're open to Q&A. So Erica, will you look at the?
Yes,
See if there are questions. I don't know if there
just
are.
waiting for questions here.
Okay, if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them. As I said, you can have access to the prompts that were in here, the material that was in here. We will be sending out access to that. And if there are no questions.
Yeah, so far, just checking to make sure if there are any questions. More so comments, Annie, complimenting you and the presentation, saying that it was really helpful.
That's good to hear. It's nice. Thank you.
One question here is there any organizational assessment that can help identify organizational factors that contribute to burnout?
Accessing the organization. I am not, that's a really good question. No, I'm not aware of that, but I will look into it. And if I find something, I will include it in the email that will go out to participants here. But certainly there are individual assessments, but I don't know of an organizational one.
Thank you.
Yeah, because work it can be as we said, an organizational problem. So that would be nice. I mean, there are climate assessments, but I don't know of any specifically to burnout.
Annie, there's a question. Oh, sorry, Annie, there's a question about, could you explain more about decreasing the use of numbing or counterproductive coping strategies?
Sure. And that's one that like we all, no, I shouldn't speak for everybody. I speak for myself and for most people. We all are prone to do that. When I'm bored, when I'm tired, when I'm stressed, I pick up my phone and I start doing whatever it is, my escape on the phone. Or I have another drink to unwind from the day, or I use my recreational substances. And so the use of them may or may not be bad for you in that moment in themselves. But one of the things is that it becomes a pattern where you end up feeling worse afterward. Often we say, all I did today after work was where did those 3 hours, 2 minutes go on my phone? So it adds to feeling less effective and less productive. And the other thing is that you're not doing the things that will be helpful to you. So even if it's not a negative use of your time, it's not a positive use of your time. You still have those feelings of frustration and incompetence, or whatever your negative feelings that we talked about earlier are, and they haven't improved and they haven't gone away. So learning skills and doing things that positively help you address those emotions, help you feel comfortable dealing with them, so you don't have to disappear into your phone. You can say, I feel really frustrated and I feel really like it was a worthless day today. Let me look at that feeling. Let me sit with that feeling. Doesn't mean it was worthless, but I feel that way. And let me think about, okay, well, what did I do today? Let me challenge the assumption that went with it. So you're not doing that, you're not addressing the problem. And that means that the next time you feel frustrated or like you didn't do anything, you go through the same pattern again because you haven't learned any better way of thinking about or challenging that thought. But emotion regulation, there's a lot of material on that. We have it in some of our talks. You can learn more about that. Again, the OITE YouTube channel or website might provide you more information about how to deal with that.
Another question, Annie, and perhaps this could be the last one. First, someone did ask if you could show the last 3 slides again.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I went through those very quickly. So this is a weekly review. It's a fun thing to do. Not fun, it's a useful thing to do. So on Sunday, what do you think about going to work on Monday? And on Friday, how do you feel looking back at the week? So it's a kind of like assessing how you're doing and then thinking about what things you can do to change that. So it's a way of doing that. What can I change? What help do I need? How do I take care of myself? The second slide is a way of checking in with yourself. What's changed? How am I feeling about my work? Do I work too hard? Am I lonely at work? We didn't talk about that, but loneliness at work is certainly a risk factor. Um, it's absence of connection. I get that. Am I tired just thinking about going to work? So it's a morning, not just Friday and Sunday, but morning assessments. Uh, and then the third prompt is thinking again. And we did some of this, my relationship at work. We looked at those. And so these are intended to be reflections for you to just think about. You can journal about these. You can talk to other people about them. It's a jumping off point with concrete questions to really use to make you get some perspective and understanding about what you're dealing with and encouraging you to think about ways you can move forward and action you can take where it would be helpful to you.
And then last question, any advice on disentangling burnout from a lack of desire to continue in academia?
I'm sorry, I missed, Erica, could you repeat that?
Sure.
The sound it was.
Sure. Any advice on disentangling burnout from a lack of desire to continue in academia?
So is it just I don't want to continue in academia or am I burnt out and therefore I don't want to continue? So I think one of the things to do is do a burnout assessment. How burnt out am I? And address the burnout because it may be really hard to know which piece of that is burnout and which piece is I'm ready for a different career path or direction. But if you are burnt out, that will seep into all of the ways that you think about and consider what to do or your abilities to problem solve. So I guess my simple recommendation is address the burnout first, and then you can see what's left and you will have the wherewithal to make the decision better. Okay, I think
All right,
we
so
are.
we're at 4:03, so I think that was the last question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and the best of luck to you. The world needs you, so take care of yourselves. And thank you.
Got that we